Hi, everybody. I'm Cynthia Garrett, and welcome to this week's session. We're back with Zania Schoeman. We're in part two of a conversation that we've been having about miracles. And from last week to this week, I challenged all of you watching to begin to pay attention to the ways that God speaks to you through other people and speaks to you directly, because that in and of itself is a miracle. And we're often looking for other kinds of miracles and overlooking the miracles that happen to us in the day-to-day, the least of which is that he woke you up today and breathed life into your very body and ours as well. So thanks for joining me. Zania, welcome back. And we're just going to continue with different kinds of miracles that we've been looking at. And this week I kind of wanted to hone us in a bit on, for example, to begin with, miracles that involved sort of a temporary or a localized suspension of the laws regarding nature. And that would really have a lot to do with the miracles of that we know about, where Jesus calmed the sea at Galilee and where he walked on water.
Absolutely.
Things like that. What do you think about those kinds of miracles?
Well, if God created everything, including man, from dust, then surely he has a much greater understanding of the molecular composition of things. And he can change them in an instant. Right. You know, to take water and to turn it into a solid thing. That is a wonderful and amazing thing, but it also gives you a clue as to how instantaneous miracles can be. You know, if you pray for healing, sometimes it does take weeks, months, or years for that miracle to come through, but you could very well go from not having an eyeball to having an eyeball, because he just changes the substance of things. And if you look at Hebrews 11 verse 1, it actually says that is what faith is. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, evidence of the things that are not seen.
Yeah.
That explains it. So faith and miracles walk very much hand in hand, I think.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. And I think that because one of the things that happens with God's children in the world today is that our faith just gets attacked and robbed on so many different levels. I mean, that's the attempt of the enemy, to use all the things in your life and all the things around you to steal your faith, right? Because if he can steal your faith, then there is no expectation of a miracle. But in reality, isn't faith itself a miracle?
It is. And it's a supernatural thing. And I think that's why it's sometimes hard for people who are not in a relationship with God to imagine what the real power of faith is, because you cannot know it unless you're plugged into the system. You know, if I can call it that, don't quote me on that, that's not theology, but you know what I mean. Yeah. You need to be part of this kingdom to really be able to tap into that thing. And your motivations need to be right, obviously. It's a relationship first, and all else will follow. Because free will was something that we were created with. Free will didn't come to us later. We were created with free will. Yeah. We abused it by listening to what Satan had to say about knowing all, going to the tree of knowledge. And what he said was, did God really say? And maybe that's exactly where we were just now in our point of doubting. Did God really say not to do that? Did God really say that you could perform miracles? You know, if you go to Mark, the last chapter of Mark, it's just as Jesus is about to ascend. And what does he say to people? He says, you go out and tell people what the gospel really is, and I will back it up with power, because you will be raising dead people. Not some of you, not some TV evangelist in Guatemala. You guys who are going to be preaching this, you will be raising dead people. You will be throwing demons out of people. You will be laying your hands and people will get healed.
Yeah.
those are the things that are going to happen. And it's that doubt that comes in, did God really say? Yes, he did. Those were his last words. I think they were important.
Yeah, it makes me sit here and think about our friend Darren Wilson and his films, in which he started out a normal Christian guy who had an aunt and uncle in the Midwest who were in a church service and they got gold teeth. And that was happening to a lot of the elderly people in his church. They were waking up and their bad teeth were getting replaced with gold teeth. And I remember the first time I heard that, and first time I saw Finger of God, and it was like, what? Is that true?
I actually have a very funny story about it. That exact thing. A friend of mine, Trushka, said, watch this movie called Finger of God. We spoke about Finger of God in the first episode. Watch this movie. And I was like, okay, I'll watch this movie. I trust you. Watch this thing. And there were these Uncle Pat and Auntie Patsy and whoever that got the gold teeth. And my mind was blown. I'd never heard of anything like it. So, of course, the first thing I do is I get into my little car, drive to my mentor, who was, she's still alive. She's in her 70s. She was about 72 at the time. And I said to her, you will not believe what I just saw. Gold teeth, da-da-da. She looks at me like this. I had known her for almost 2 years. We had spoken about God and the Bible at least twice a week, having tea for almost 2 years. She looks at me and she goes, she pulls her little lip back, and there it is, the most perfect gold tooth I had ever seen in my life. And I said to her, why didn't you tell me this? Do you understand that this is part of my education? I need to know these things. And she said, I didn't want you to feel jealous, so I didn't tell you. It's mine. It's mine and God's. It's not, it's not there to show to everyone. It's not the point of it. The point was God loved me in that moment and he gave it to me. And I had such a revelation on that. If you want to talk about gold teeth, her friend went with her to the service where she actually did get this gold tooth because it happened instantaneously while sitting in a church. She had a friend that she was mentoring at the time who was in the occult, born into the occult.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so she didn't have choice in the matter and then got saved out of the occult, really rescued, because you didn't get saved out, you get rescued out of it, became saved. But they were such I don't even want to put the word power on them, but they were such an influential group that they would follow her around. They would even astro travel into her bedroom and frighten her at night and things like that. So she was going through a real ordeal getting rid of these guys. And they were sitting in church and they both got these beautiful gold teeth and they felt so loved by God, is what she said to me. That was the feeling, that they were just felt pure love and that individual love that God gives to us. And the story ends where the same woman, a few weeks later, in her bedroom, by herself, no music, no freaky preachers, no nothing, just this woman in her bedroom crying at the foot of her bed, sobbing because they once again had found her and terrorized her. And she just had this very odd feeling that she needed to get up. And she got up from falling asleep at the foot and end of the bed, walked into her bathroom, pulled her little lip back, and she had another one on the other side that just spontaneously happened in her bedroom. And the encouragement that came with it proves the point of these things. It's not there for any other reason than to encourage and uplift the body and to connect us and to remind us that no matter how much we believe in God, there's always more. There's always more trust, more faith.
It's so true because, and we've ended up here on Darren's movie, and I just have to go with it. It's amazing we're talking about this because he's going to be on this season, and his films changed. I mean, they changed my entire household, but this one in particular, I remember after I watched it, it was about 2 weeks before I showed it to my husband and my son, and it was, and I don't ever really talk too much about it. I do sometimes, but it was my brother, Lenny Kravitz, who sent me the movies, the first two to begin with, Finger of God and Furious Love. And he basically sent them with a little, in an email gifting from Amazon, hey, I need you to check this out, kind of like your friend, like, I need to get a normal Christian's opinion. Like, you know, he's like, okay, now, like, I know you and I know you're not crazy, so I really want to know, like, what do you think about this?
You think it's okay, then I know.
Right, exactly, right. Like, I guess that's a compliment to you and I, right? Like, okay, all right, cool, I'll be the measure of normal. I don't know what that says about his idea of what's normal. But anyway, that's another conversation. And so, of course, you know, I watch these movies, and I mean, I was raised Catholic. Signs and wonders did not follow me. And the reading of the Bible didn't really follow me either, because I thought that was really something reserved for the priest, right?
Labor people.
Yeah, exactly. The anointed men and women of God. I didn't really know that God wanted a relationship with me and that he wanted to meet me in his word, you know, so that would come much later. But in any case, in my upbringing, that just was not a part of my paradigm. So when I watched these films, I mean, I was blown away. I had no grid for that kind of miracle.
You don't have shelves to pack it in, do you? You have to reshuffle your whole brain.
No, and I mean, literally looking at miracles of people getting gold teeth and jewels appearing and people being raised from the dead, you know, which is right up there on the list of all these different kinds of miracles. But standing in my kitchen about 10 days after watching them, I was really arguing with God now at this point, because my argument was, okay, God, look, maybe my husband will get this, but my child is a child, and he's just coming to know you. But I don't want to show him these movies if this is not really true, because I'm not trying to make him crazy. Like, I don't want to raise him and teach him, you know, to have some way out there relationship with God. I mean, you know, it's like, God, I want him to be kind of a normal kid too. You know, it's funny, because all of this is normal. It's just that we don't live in what God created.
You're right about that. John
Totally.
Arnold puts it really well in that movie where he says, our normal is not normal.
Yeah.
We need to adapt our normal to be God's normal, which is the
Exactly.
real normal and not the fake normal.
Exactly, exactly. And I feel so bad for young people today, because they're accepting a very small box to live in. And I mean, I have hope for this generation of millennials, you know, because I do feel like they're a bit different, and in their different, they are going to question what they've been told about God and how small God is, and they've kind of been led to sort of push him out in a way. And I think as they realize that there's nothing greater to hope in than God, they'll begin to pull him in and stuff in this country in a different way. But anyway, as I was standing there having all these debates with God about this movie and whether to show it to my son and my husband, all of a sudden, and I will never forget it, little white flakes of manna start falling from heaven all around me. And I remember standing there watching these things, and I looked up, and it's so crazy, because, you know, I'm even tempted to this day to not want to talk about this as the miracle it was, because it was crazy. I actually got on top of a chair and looked on top of the oven and the cabinets, thinking, maybe there's an air vent up here and dust is blowing. Of course, there wasn't one, you know, and eventually it stopped. And I stood there with just this feeling of, wow, God just showed me this miracle as a sign that this really is my new reality.
And it was manna falling.
And it was manna.
You could catch the little wafers, and it's also in the movie.
Yeah.
The guy that opens his book at Revelation, specific verse at Revelation, almost every time he does it, there's manna lying in the Bible.
Yeah, and it's what he fed the Israelites in
It
the
is.
desert.
Yes. Why are we so surprised that he would do it today?
Yeah.
One of my favorite teachings that I like to teach is, you know, in the Old Testament, people met God the Father. Mm-hmm. They met him very physically with pillars of you know, pillars of smoke and fire and, you know, covering. And Moses actually saw the back of God as he walked past him as he was in the cleft. And then you have the New Testament where people very physically met Jesus when he was born, and he walked with them. Yeah. Why do we think that we should be the orphans that should just rely on our cognitive ability to rationalize that God might actually have a little spot somewhere in the parts that we can't explain away with science, when the Holy Spirit is the third part of who he is. This is the third day, and he is with us as physically as God the Father was with the Israelites, as Jesus was with the New Testament apostles. We have the Holy Spirit. And if we don't recognize him as a person of the Trinity with full deity, then we're going to miss out knowing him.
It's so true. You know, I'm sitting here thinking about how many miracle stories, you know, have been a part of my life and your life. And some that we've been talking about here and some that we've spoken about just in our friendship. And what does the enemy do to rob the reality of these stories? Because sitting here talking about them, you think, okay, that's it. Satan, you're done again, you know, but wow.
I think we touched on it in the first episode that we did, where as if you have 1,000 people getting up out of wheelchairs, 50 of them were guys paid to come and sit in a chair and get up to make it look good.
Right.
Then all the entire 1,000 people that got out of wheelchairs will be questioned and dismissed. It will just, and because we're in an information age where we have so much information coming our way, when we see a hint of fake, we take the baby and the bath water and we throw all of it out the door.
Right.
Because one person faked being blind and now can see, because one person faked getting up. You know, and it's not what I would like, and this is what we said, you need to, as a Christian, start thinking about it the other way around. If there's 1 million and only one is true, it means God's still doing miracles. And if there's only one, then why is there only one? Is it because we're doing something wrong?
Right. That is exactly what my son said in response to my thinking about people getting slain in the spirit. You know, this happened a few years ago, and you know, we were actually at a Randy Clark conference for 3 days in Orlando, Florida. I will never forget it because Reinhard Bonnke was speaking, and I was so excited to actually hear Reinhard Bonnke speak because, well, he's Bonnke. What do we say? I mean, and I knew that miracles happened around Bonnke. That much I knew because even before I was surrendered to Christ as a young girl in my late 20s, early 30s, when I first started working in secular TV, I had a gentleman who had such a heart to help me. And he was probably at the time, maybe about 15 years older than I, and he was struggling. He was a really on fire believer, but he always struggled with his sexuality and with finding comfort in his skin because of it. And he became a dear friend, and I loved him so much and love him to this day, although it's been many, many, many years since I've seen him or spoken to him. But one day we were sharing stories, and I said, Patrick, why do you help me so much? And he said, you know, you've got such a godly spirit. And he said, and I do love God, you know? And I said, oh, you think because you're gay that I was gonna think you don't love God? You know, we used to quip. And he goes, well, you know how that one goes. And I said, why do you love God? And he goes, because I know that he's real and he's powerful. And I go, why do you know that? And he goes, Cynthia, miracles exist. And I remember looking at him, now I was like a kid, and I go, well, what do you know about miracles existing? And he said, because that's how I got started in this industry. And I said, okay, I don't follow you. And he goes, my first job was as a cameraman, and I was sent to Africa. And he said, and I was hired to document the miracles of a man named Reinhard Bonnke. Wow. Do you know who Reinhard Bonnke is? And I said, no, I've never heard of him before. This is many, many years ago. And he goes, you need to Google him. He said, because he said, not only was I to document his miracles, I was to follow up with the people. And he said, and I'm telling you, it was all true. And he said, and that's why I know. He goes, that's why I believe in God. And he said, and it's why I have struggles with myself about certain things. And it was then that I started really kind of following Reinhard Bonnke and his ministry, because I thought, wow, this man's real, you know? Anyway, fast forward many years later to this conference, kind of been picking up on what you were saying. And I would watch 70% of the people getting slain in the spirit, the pastors that would come up to me and they were trying to knock me over and I'd brace my feet like, this is not gonna work. This is just not gonna work. So I had really thrown out the prospect of God.
See how that happened?
Totally.
Your baby, your bathwater, because one person did a weird thing.
Totally. So Christian, my son, was quite like you. He would say, Mom, if 30% of it is real and 70% of it is fake, don't you think that God would tolerate all of it in order to touch his children in a real way? Mm-hmm.
When you're in the fivefold ministry and teaching, you have to have a revelation on a matter. You can't just go and read it, memorize it, and because I'm going to give you dead word. I need to give you the word with power. So I first have to experience it before I can give it to you. And that has led to some very interesting things in my life. But specifically on that topic, because I didn't grow up in a church where people were lying on the floor, I thought it was very, very strange. I was taught that it's unbalanced. You know, unbalanced emotional people that don't believe in God with their minds, because they're out of their minds, basically.
Right.
So for me to have to go into that was a big stretch for my mind. And because God had right on the first day said to me, forget the things that you know, that was the only reason I tolerated the idea even, or entertained the idea that this could be possible. And I remember having my first experience and then understanding what the point of it was, which really most of the time, besides God giving us divine downloads on ideas to fast forward us and all these, there are many different reasons why people end up on the floor. Most of the time, it's just when he takes away all your stress, all your worries, all your sadness, all your sickness, it leaves you weak at the knee, like a lover. You just cannot stand up because you are knocked out by the love of God. So to experience that is something that you cannot explain to another human. It is an unexplainable thing. And I remember even then doubting, you know, is it my mind? Is it because I see it and I want it and now it's happening to me? Am I being brainwashed? Are they hypnotizing me? You know, you have to ask these questions. We can't just blindly go running into things. So the first time I had a true revelation that this is not a learned thing was we were preaching at like it was like a year where you would, like a gap year thing is the word I was looking for, a gap year. And we were preaching there, and the kids that were there were from every kind of church that you can imagine, from completely Catholic to some kids not even going to church. So we were preaching to these kids, and some of them didn't know what we were talking about. So anyway, we hadn't gotten to the point where we were laying hands on them because it would have just perplexed them. They weren't there yet. We needed to explain to them how, you know, who the Holy Spirit is before you can do that. But this one girl came to me afterwards, and she had never seen or heard about people falling in the, she had never seen it on TV. She had never been exposed to it. She was only 18 years old. And we were talking about prayer that day and laying hands. And she said, I want you to lay hands on me because I smoke, and I have been smoking for many years. And I want you to lay hands on me because I really do want to quit smoking. And I said, well, of course I will. Now, I'm not thinking, you know, push and ankle tap and you're going to be on the floor. I'm not thinking this. I'm thinking I'm just going to pray for her a normal little prayer, and she's going to stand there and receive it, and God's going to do it. Well, God had way other plans. There was, again, no lights, no music, no church organs playing in the background. I just laid my hand on her chest and I said, body, get in line with the word of God. Jesus, heal her from this affliction. Addiction, leave this body right now. And as I said that in the name of Jesus, she went, whoa, poof, out, lights out. And there she was lying, and I'm thinking, this wasn't part of the plan.
Right. I don't know what that was all about.
Oops, didn't mean to do that. God did. And she came to and she said, what happened to me? What happened to me? I feel great, but what happened to me? She was in this complete conflict of confusion about what had happened, but feeling great at the same time.
Totally, yeah.
Should I be worried? This is really good, but should I be worried? And that for me, in that moment, the purity of not knowing that that is what's supposed to happen when you get prayed for, And with me not pushing her over or ankle tapping her or throwing things at her and just actually wanting her to stand and receive it, I realized, Zania, you are so not in control of this thing.
No, at all. But you said something so amazing, just in wanting her to receive it. Just in the love in your heart to see her receive this thing. Not that that's always going to give you the miracle, you know, but it certainly, I think, has to be a prerequisite, you know, to help us get to those kinds of things. And these are miracles. These are miracles. You know, there are things that we want to, well, I think things that the world doesn't want to often acknowledge, and that we as Christians don't often talk enough about.
No, we don't.
No, and it's really, it is the power of our testimony.
You know, Paul says in the New Testament, I think it's in 2 Corinthians, I'm not sure, he says, if I seem crazy to you, it is because I am so crazy for God. And if I look sane to you, it's purely for your benefit.
I love that, because underneath, you're right. Underneath, I always pray, Lord, give me crazy faith. Give me crazy faith. Okay, we're out of time for today. We're gonna have to come back again next week. Won't you join us? I promise you'll find Zania and I sitting right here on the couch for what I think will be the conclusion of this topic on miracles. I'll see you then. Wow, I hope you're loving this session. I am, and I hope to see you next week for the conclusion of this session. But for now, I wanted to actually remind you to pick up a copy of Prodigal Daughter, A Journey Home to Identity, which is my first book. I gotta tell you, the concepts of spiritual warfare are all throughout this book. And I get to go into a lot more detail and a lot more explanation than I actually can in just a mini session. But I really think it'll bless you in overcoming the challenges that come against your life, your day, your family, your home, your marriage, your self-esteem, your values, your relationship with Christ, all of it. All of it. So I'll leave you with this. You can find it everywhere, online at retail sellers and in some bookstores. I hope it'll bless you. I am Cynthia Garrett. I will see you next week.